Mr. Newland, I have a question for you. I represent a very rural district and a district that has one of the largest prevalences of wildfire in the country. So it's something that I am continually concerned about. You testified in support of H.R. 8109, and one of the things in that bill that I have a concern with is that it would establish substantial barriers to vegetation management to prevent wildfires. You also submitted written testimony on H.R. 8719 that would apply a wilderness designation to additional 60,000 acres in Arizona. Do you share my concern that those provisions of those bills would make it more difficult for the department to manage wildfire risk in those areas?
Thank you, Congressman. As it relates to 8109, I believe that that's something that could be addressed. I think that tribes have share the same interests in preventing catastrophic wildfires.
Okay, I mean, there's a section of the bill that says that vegetation management permitted shall be subject to regulations, policies, and practices and only necessary to protect or maintain or enhance tribal cultural areas, right? So, I mean, you can understand why my concern would be elicited by that.
I do, Congressman. I'll add that we support the overall goal of making sure that we have the tools to protect the unique interests of tribes and indigenous people in these landscapes, and are willing to work through some of the technical aspects of the legislation to address things like this. I'll reiterate, I visited California this summer in the Tule River reservation in the Central Valley and saw the impacts of drought and wildfire near the reservation, and was also impressed by their work, despite all that, to protect the sequoia forests on the reservation. And I think
to be clear, though, sir, what I'm concerned about is that these bills don't give even the tribes the ability to manage the wildfire risk on in these areas. Well, let me give a specific example. So H.R. 8719, which applies a wilderness designation to 60,000 acres in Arizona, would restrict the use of some of the practices for managing wildfire risk that have been successful in other places in the country. And I'll give you a very poignant example just from this last week. In my district, we had a fire ignite in the southern edge of my district. The Radford fire actually came within a couple of thousand feet of the community that I live in. And I'll tell you, that's a pretty poignant experience to watch, a flame front advancing towards your house. I had a discussion with the incident commander in which he told me that had the community, the National Forest System, CAL FIRE, and local fire agencies, had they not invested in the last couple of years in efforts such as mechanical thinning, some prescribed burning, the creation of fire breaks, and the cutting of some access roads, had that not been done, they would not have been able to stop that fire, and my house would be a pile of ash today. So, I mean, you can understand why I'm so concerned about that. Sir, none of those activities are permitted in wilderness areas. So you can see why I'm concerned about the fact that locking up an additional 60,000 acres with a designation that prohibits those kinds of fire risk management activities, would be concerning. So, did you share those concerns?
With respect to 8719 and the specific characteristics of the proposed Gila Bend area, I would have to defer to my colleague from BLM, but I can say, Congressman, overall, and as it relates to 8109, I think tribes share the same interests that you're articulating this morning, and we would be happy to work with the subcommittee on how to account for that, to make sure that there's proper fire management and collaboration in the stewardship and protection of those lands.
All right. Well, I mean, I think we all share on this subcommittee a common goal of making sure that the tribes have access to those lands and a voice in managing those lands. And we all share the goal of wanting to be good conservators of our public lands. But the problem is we don't want to create restrictions that explicitly disallow the kind of activities that have been successful in managing wildfire risk, be it for the tribes or for anyone else. And those are the concerns that I have with these bills. But I thank you for your testimony. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.